Showtime. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Night Fright. My name's Brent, Holland. I'm your host tonight. Let me read this from our guest tonight, new book called Haunted Hamilton. From the Hermitage ruins to Dundurn Castle, from the Customs House to Stony Creek Battlefield Park, the city of Hamilton, Ontario. That's right, folks. We're going to Hamilton, Ontario. Is steeped in a rich history and culture, but beneath the surface of the Steel City, and for our American viewers, Hamilton, Ontario is the equivalent to our Pennsylvania. It's Steeltown, Canada, instead of Steeltown, USA. There dwells a darker heart. From the shadows of yesteryear arise the unexplainable, the bizarre, and the chilling. Lock the doors. Turn on the lights before you settle down with this book. Actually, that's pretty good advice, folks, because I've read the book. Because once you begin to read this about the supernatural elements that lurk within this seemingly normal city, in southern Ontario, strange bumps in the night will take on new, more sinister meanings. Prepare to be thrilled and chilled with this collection of tales compiled from historical documents, first-person accounts, and the files of the paranormal group Haunted Hamilton, which has been investigating and celebrating Hamilton's historic haunted past since 1999. Folks, settle in, get in your comfy chairs, I always say. Put your feet up, relax. For the next hour, we're telling ghost stories, true ghost stories, with our guest tonight, Mark Leslie, all the way from Hamilton. True Ghost Stories, Haunted Hamilton is the name of the book. Get the coffee going, get the tea going, get a beverage of your choice going, strap in and hang on, because here we go, baby.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Tonight, folks, True Ghost Stories from Hamilton, Ontario. A book out called Haunted Hamilton by our guest tonight, Mark Leslie. Just let me read a little bit about his bio. Mark Leslie is the author of One Hand Screaming, which I have right here. I'm reaching for it and pulling it up right now. And the editor of North of Infinity 2, Campus Chills, which folks, fans of this show will know is in the archives, www.nightfrightshow.com. That'll take you right to a place where you can find our interview about this book, and you can order the book from the comfort of your own home as well. And he's also the author of Tesseract 16, Parnassus Unbound, and of course he lives in Hamilton, Ontario. But he also hails from where I used to hail from, Sudbury, Ontario, Levac to be specific. Welcome back, Mark. This is a great book.
Thanks, Brent. It's great to be back with you.
It's really fun. You know, I was telling you, I was reading this all through the summer at various points. And folks, this was my go-to book during the summer, by the way. And I was reading it outside, and it got caught in the rain, unfortunately, because I had left it out there by mistake. But man, is this thing jam-packed full with wonderful, wonderful stories. Some of them actually creeped me out beyond comparison, and some of them were really informing. I guess we should let's start out right away. One of the ones that enticed me was the Customs House and the Dark Lady. Can you tell us that story, a brief synopsis of that one?
Well, I think, and I opened the book with the Customs House because the Dark Lady is the oldest ghost of Hamilton. She was originally written about Alexander Wingfield in the 1800s. Had written a poem in which he refers to a peeler, which is a term for a police officer, and it refers to a peeler who saw her turned white with a fright, and it's this fantastic poem that describes her as this beast, this giant monster, like this demon, this devil with horns, and she's 20 feet tall and a whole bit, and larger than life, of course. And in fact, the Dark Lady, when you look at the stories, was really an unfortunate woman who was in a perilous situation, ended up falling in with the captain, wanting to have a life with the captain, this poor woman who ended up being murdered, and now haunts the Customs House in Hamilton. There's been many sightings of her, and she is not some hideous, terrible beast. She's a sad woman who is trapped there for all eternity, and she's often seen on the stairs. One of the most intriguing stories of the Dark Lady of Customs House is from Stephanie Lechniak, who's one of the co-founders of Haunted Hamilton. And they were doing a tour, and she was by herself down in the lower level near the lobby. She was cleaning up some wax that had inadvertently gotten onto one of the tables, and she was trying to scrape it off before anyone noticed. And as she's scraping the wax, she just felt something looking at her, and she looked up, and right across from her, she saw a woman on the stairs, looked at her, and then slowly vanished. And yeah, and that just always strikes me as, because I know Stephanie, and you hear the story from somebody that has seen it firsthand. That's my favorite story of the Customs House.
Can you describe the Customs House a little bit? It's a big building, I suspect. Lots of rooms. In the book you've written, there's 25 ghosts apparently housing there. Do they pay rent?
Yeah,
because that's our tax dollars in action, isn't it?
Yeah, they should. Yeah, they should pay rent, shouldn't they?
I'm making light.
It has an amazing history, actually. When you look at that, it's the Workers Heritage Museum now. It has gone through such an amazing amount of change over time, and that's one of the sad things about the book, that it's almost a constant theme. Is there's some really creepy ghost stories in there. There's some really eerie things that happen. But there's also a sadness to it. There's a sadness when you look at what had happened to the Customs House, and there's certain periods in Hamilton's history where it got decrepit, and there was a major fire, and there was damage to the top floors. Fortunately, that's one of the buildings that has been restored and saved. But when you look at the history of the Customs House, I learned the history of this beautiful city of Hamilton that I live in. I learned that it wasn't always Steel Town. Before it was Steel Town, and the Customs House had been used for this purpose, it was Textile Town. Hamilton was a big textile industry. You have the Hamilton, Toronto, Buffalo transit system that was sort of the main trading through that area, and the reason the Customs House is haunted by 25 different spirits, of course, is this used to be a central place for people, and it was a lot of times it was, I think of it as the Ellis Island of Hamilton, and so you did get a lot of people who their first entrance into New Canada was through that Customs House. Coming through that was pretty much the first place to visit. There's stories of homeless people who died in a tunnel collapse in the building. There's another story of rape and murder that took place in the Customs House. I mean, some of the other creepier tales involve seeing the word murder etched in reverse images if it's from somebody writing it from inside the wall. And I mean, that kind of thing just gives me the chills right now when I think about that. And so again, the Customs House really defines a lot of things that are important to Hamilton, and really defines a lot of things that are, some of the creepiest ghost stories that we have in the book.
Right. Folks, www.nightfrightshow, easy way to get the book as always. The book is called Haunted Hamilton, full of ghost stories. It's, ghost stories are universal, folks. Every city has them. These just happen to be placed in Hamilton. What's unique about these stories, though, besides the Hamilton aspect, is they're all true. These are accounts from eyewitnesses, as he just said, living eyewitnesses, part of Haunted Hamilton's walks. The folks that run that have seen some of these ghosts and had interactions with them. So you're going to want to get this book. This is the period of time that's perfect. You know, it's getting dark out now. The nights are getting longer. The days much, much shorter. It's cold. It's miserable. The winds are blowing right across the lake, Lake Ontario for me. And you're going to want to settle in, get in your nice comfy chair when the kids are asleep or in between classes or up night, if you're up late at doing an overnighter, if you're late at night and settling in and reading a great book. This is a good book for you. Haunted Hamilton, www.nightfrightshow.com. The author, of course, Mark Leslie, has been on our show before talking about his other book, Campus Chills. And I'm going to plug that one for you too, Mark, because this is a great book. It's for students. Hello. Don't want to sleep at night? You want to stay up? Again, packed full of stories of ghosts, specifically on campuses from coast to coast to coast, 3 coasts in Canada. Again, that show is in the archives, www.nightfrightshow.com. Let's go back to Mark and talk some more about those ghosts in Hamilton. The history of Hamilton. Now, you've touched on it a little bit. Can you just tell the folks that are unfamiliar with the geographical location of it, how close it is in proximity to Toronto? Most people know where Toronto is.
Okay, so Hamilton is basically southeast from Toronto. It's on a good day when the traffic is fine, it's a 45-minute drive from Toronto. It's just on the edge of Lake Ontario. We're on the corner of Lake Ontario and sort of wrap around that corner. To people from the Toronto region, once you've fallen off the edge of the earth, you've made it to Hamilton. Or at least that's the viewpoint I get from my colleagues. I work in Toronto, so I do the commute every day. And again, from Hamilton, it's a 45-minute drive or less to Niagara Falls to cross the border and get into Niagara Falls, New York, Buffalo, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's really centralized, isn't it, in that area?
Yeah, it really is. And I know you had mentioned, Sudbury, my old stomping grounds growing up in Levack. I always look at Hamilton as being cursed with the steel town curse, right? It's an industrial town, just like Sudbury was the mining town. And yet, like Sudbury, which has beautiful natural resources, beautiful beaches, and the world's largest freshwater lake in the center of the city, Hamilton itself, 5 minutes from my house on Hamilton Mountain, is the Bruce Trail. Gorgeous. It's the Niagara Escarpment that I can go, walk 5 minutes out my door, and I'm suddenly walking on the Niagara Escarpment. It's absolutely a gorgeous, beautiful city. It has the best of a large city and the best of a small city. I always look at it as if Toronto and Sudbury had a baby. That baby would be Hamilton.
That's a great way to put it. You should put that in your next book. You see that. And the point, I guess, folks, I'm trying to make about Hamilton and its close proximity to Toronto. If you're in Toronto, just jolt on that. 45 minutes is nothing. Well worth your time to go down to Hamilton and take the haunted ghost tours and, just go around to all these places we're going to be discussing tonight and get scared out of your wits. Let's continue. Dundurn Castle. This one scared the bejesus out of me too. Can we talk a little bit about that? Now, I don't want you to give too much of the book away, but we're going to have to walk a fine line because, folks, the reason for doing this show is so you buy the book and enjoy it yourself. We don't want to give the whole book away. But can we go there?
Sure. So Dundurn Castle, again, coming back to the beginnings of Hamilton and Sir Alan McNabb, and his beautiful estate as you were first coming into Hamilton on the main road. That was where you saw this gorgeous building. It looked beautiful from the water. It looked beautiful from York. And that's this gorgeous, beautiful mansion. When the royal family came to Hamilton, that is where Prince Charles and Camilla, just a couple of years ago, that's where they visited because there's associations with royalty and the whole bit. It's a gorgeous, beautiful estate. But there's some mysteries involved. There's a mysterious building on the estates of Dundurn that they weren't really sure what it's for. And there's speculation that is this where they did cockfights? Is this some other strange building? One of the more interesting stories of Dundurn Castle isn't a ghost, but it's Sir Alan MacNab and his bagpipes. There are tales of him playing the bagpipes in the middle of the night, and having gone, in researching the book and in writing the book, I'd gone on the ghost walks that Haunted Hamilton had put together. I'd read the books, done some research in the history, and I mean, one of the books I read was just the architecture of Dundurn Castle, which it was just fascinating to learn more about that. But I would wander the grounds. And I was there with my friend Peter Rainford, who had done some of the photography for the book, and the picture of Dundurn Castle was his.
Just let me interject. There's tons of photos in this book, so I should have mentioned this before too, and they're outstanding. And hopefully you're going to be looking at some of them as this show is going on, because I'm going to ask Mark to send me them if that's okay. But anyways, we'll talk about that after. Okay, so you were walking the grounds, and was this at night, Mark, or during the day?
Yeah, at night. So it was last fall. So I finished the book last fall, and then realized, oh my God, I still need a bunch of pictures that I needed to give to the editor, and so I called my buddy Pete and said, we got to go out and do this tonight. And we went and drove to 6 different places to take pictures all on the same night. It was a beautiful foggy evening. It was just eerie. It was creepy. And there we were walking the grounds, and I was telling him the story of Sir Alan MacNab, who used to be out on the roof playing the bagpipes in the middle of the night. And I said, could you imagine you're out taking a midnight stroll and you just hear this haunting echo of bagpipes in the middle of the night? Imagine if we heard that right now. And then, of course, like I ran. No, I just so we stayed long enough to take some pictures, and then got out of there really, really quickly, because I just ended up creeping myself out a little bit.
I do that all the time too. I remember I was in the studio once at the university. I was scoring a horror film, and I was just graduating, and they were kind enough to let me use the second-year studio. I was at the back of the building, an old English type of school at Concordia University, in the early campus, folks, second floor. And I was working on the key scene, I guess you could say. It was a devil worship scene, and I had all this voodoo type of music going and things of that nature. And all of a sudden there was a huge, this is 2 o'clock in the morning, honest to God, there was a storm. It was the middle of the summer. There was a storm outside and banging on the door. And I went to the door, there was no one there. So I turned all the gear off and went home. Actually, some of it I left on, but I think what it was probably a security guard pulling my leg. It scared the, right out of it. I was gone, eh? So I completely understand what you go through. And actually, what was the creepiest moment for you in doing research for this book? Was there some hardships involved?
You know what? There were a few. I'm sitting in the room where I spent most of my time writing. This is my den in the basement of our house, and there were times when I was just pouring through the old newspaper clippings from some stories that had taken place, that I was absolutely scared, too scared to leave the light in here, to turn off the lights and go upstairs and go to bed. I sat here a little bit freaked out, and then when I finally did summon up the courage to do that, when I got to bed, I laid in bed and just, my eyes open, looking for shapes and shadows in the night. The actual coming to research, I think I went on a mid-October or a mid-August ghost walk with Haunted Hamilton, the good folks who'd been doing that since 1999, and I went to the Hermitage ruins, and I scared myself silly just driving out to the spot. It was just the anticipation of going on the walk. I had been to the Hermitage ruins during the daylight before. I had never actually gone on their ghost walk there. I'd heard the stories, I'd read about it, but I had never actually gone on the ghost walk, and I was just scared, even though there were going to be a lot of people there.
Mark, can you share one of those stories? Can you share one of those stories you heard? I want to draw the people into this story you're about to tell. Okay. So
the Hermitage ruins, again, were a magnificent piece of classic architecture from our history that had, burned in a fire, and it's just I'll send the pictures so you can show them this. Just this brick ruins that are left of this, what was once this beautiful, beautiful estate. And people have the most common legend there, and there's a street called Lover's Lane near the Hermitage ruins in Ancaster, just on the outskirts of Hamilton, that were related to the coachman who had fallen in love with the daughter of the owner, couldn't have her, and went out and hung himself. So the owner found the coachman, and they were good friends. But it came to the fact that you can't have my daughter. You're a servant, and she is, a rich person.
Upper class.
He ended up cutting the body down and then burying the body in what's now called Lover's Lane for Ancaster, and so there are often specters seen in that area, either of him hanging and swinging, of two lovers walking hand in hand. Maybe they found themselves after death, and and that actually leads to a tale from Daniel, one of the co-founders of Haunted Hamilton. So Stephanie and Daniel, having been involved in paranormal, they had only encountered, each of them, one ghost or one actual supernatural occurrence in the history of doing this. Stephanie was with the Dark Lady, and Daniel they had just finished a tour, and the grounds are actually locked up at night at the initial gatehouse, so you can't get into them after dark. And so they were. He was called by the ranger, who was saying, "Okay, we're locking up the grounds." So Daniel was saying, "Okay, we finished the tour, but now we have to get going." So he was gathering up all of the people to say, "Okay, we have to get going. We don't want to be locked in here for the night. You don't want to be here in the middle of the night." And he saw two people walking across the field, just on the other side of the ruins. And he called out to them, and they paused, and then they walked into the woods. And he knew the spot where they were walking into the woods because there was a story about a well that used to be there, and it was now overgrown. And it used to be a common path that people would walk constantly, but nobody could actually do that without a great deal of difficulty. They walked into the woods. He called again and ran to them, thinking, "Oh God, they're going to get lost if they're goofing around, whatever the whole thing." And he shone the flashlight behind them into the woods, and he was just a second behind them, and there was nothing there. But the real eerie thing about that is, while Daniel saw these two people and saw them go into the woods, Stephanie had come around the corner after she heard him call the first time, and she couldn't see anything. Daniel was the only person who saw them. She just saw him calling to nobody and chasing after nobody as well. So that's what makes the story that much more eerie, is that they only revealed themselves to him.
Oh my God. And folks, all those stories we're telling tonight and more, this book is jam-packed with stories like that. You're going to love this book. Haunted Hamilton, folks, right there. Our guest tonight, Mark Leslie. And easy way to get it is always www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. And tonight's a good night to do that. The winds are blowing right across Lake Ontario tonight. You had mentioned there's a gate on that residence, and I was just wondering, is that to keep people out or keep things in?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. And I can't get over the fact that they go back and they're I'm a sissy, folks. I'm going to confess right here, right now, if I was ever to see a ghost, gonzo. I wouldn't even entertain the thought of sticking around and trying to take a picture, talking to it. If anything, I would send it an email and offer to, maybe send them off a check for a cup of coffee or something, but I'd be gone. So what amazes me is not only with the knowledge of all these ghosts running around, you decided to go there yourself and search in your own quest. Mark, what's wrong here?
Yeah, no kidding.
Did you have any experiences, even just feelings, when you were in that presence?
I had been scared. I had been worried. I had been anxious. My heart was racing. But I didn't see anything that I would have called a supernatural experience. I didn't see anything that wasn't my own overactive imagination. And again, I am a believer. I believe in that there are things beyond this world that are there. I believe that there are impressions that either deceased people can leave, or even people who are still alive can leave they can leave spiritual impressions on a place that we continue to see specters of. But I had never seen anything like that myself. But that being said, I did do what I tried to do my due diligence to go to the places and just stand there and see if I could feel anything. And a lot of times what I did feel was sadness. I felt sadness for the abandonment of history, the fact that we move forward and we just let we let these landmarks go, we let them decay, we don't care for them. And that more than anything is what I had felt. Besides terror, I felt some sadness.
You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly about the historical aspects. You know, I'm broadcasting out of Kingston, Ontario, and folks, in Kingston, Ontario, we have something called the Maximum Security Penitentiary that goes back to 1870. And at the time of this broadcast right now, they're talking about shutting it down within 2 years. That would be 2015 or so. And they're thinking about destroying the building and putting up, for lack of a better, new condos and that type of thing, developing the whole area. And I think it would be such a tragedy because I had gone to Alcatraz, Mark, a couple of years ago, and they have turned that into, I think it's 10,000 people a day go there. It's insane. And I was able to virtually lie down on the same bed that Al Capone had lay down on. I looked up at the same ceiling and counted all the cracks. And there was a connection there. I don't know what you would want to call it, but I thought that was well worth the price of admission to try and understand what a criminal of that stature would go through in isolation and things like that. And we've just done a show on the 5 serial killers that are housed here in Kingston at the penitentiary, and they'll be moved, of course. But I'm thinking this would be a great tourist draw to see the history there and how the criminal, I guess, incarceration has changed over the years from the tortures and to somewhat more humane circumstances. Although there's a good argument when you're talking about serial killers whether that should even be instilled or not. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's a shame. It's tragedy. And once the building's gone, it's gone. That's it. It's like cutting off that piece of history. Folks, let's continue. If you're just joining us, lots of time left. We're just near the halfway mark. www.nightfrightshow.com. We're talking about ghosts tonight, specifically from Hamilton, Haunted Hamilton, and our guest tonight is Mark Leslie. And easy way to get the book, as always, just click on the book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. There were some touching moments as well in the book. You had mentioned the Lover's Lane one. That was one for sure, because in those days, of course, you couldn't marry really out of class. You were kind of stuck to it. Could we talk a little bit about the battles that went on, the 1812 battles? The War of 1812 was fought there, folks. There was one in particular called the Battlefield House, which is appropriately named. Can we talk a little bit about that and some of the apparitions that have been seen around there?
Yeah, I mean, so Hamilton being so close to the U.S. border, and the War of 1812 being a significant war in the history of our two countries, a lot of people died in the Hamilton area. So a lot of the ghosts and a lot of the stories having to do with Hamilton intersect with the War of 1812. The Stony Creek Battlefield Museum is where one of the main battles from the War of 1812 took place, and there are often reports of seeing soldiers in the pre-dawn hours walking across the field in line, in formation, like they would have been, the redcoats and the etc. But the actual museum has been haunted by the family, and there's just weird circumstances that have been unexplained by people who work there, staff who have found things disappearing only to reappear. Strange things like vacuums not working properly even though they're plugged in, and there's no reason why it suddenly stops but then suddenly starts up again, and strange things like that just continue to occur. So it's a fascinating thing when you look at the layers of people who used to walk these grounds before us, and wonder how many of them are still walking those grounds today.
Walking. And there's many stories, of course, from battlefields right around the world of people seeing dead soldiers walking. And it always pulls on my heartstrings, folks, because primarily these are just young folks, right? Male, female, whatever. And their lives are just taken away from them in the snap of a second. And I often wonder if they even know they're dead, or if they're just stuck consciously in a loop, or what is it that keeps them there and they haven't gone to the light, so to speak, and moved on? Is it just a rip in the time continuum? I don't know. Any speculation on that, Mark?
Well, it's funny when you say that is sometimes maybe you don't realize you're dead, and that's the classic thing. But one of the most fascinating ghosts from the book Haunted Hamilton is a historian by the name of Alma Dick Lauder. I end up quoting from Alma Dick Lauder's writing 2 or 3 times throughout the course of the book, because she was a historian fascinated with ghosts and decaying old buildings and preserving history. She ended up, she was associated with the Hermitage ruins. It was her family home. It burnt down. She ended up living in a tent outside the ruins because she loved that place so much. When she died, her spirit has been seen there. And Alma, who is so fascinated with history and ghosts, ends up becoming a ghost in Haunted Hamilton. And that's when you talked about the old buildings that are no longer there. One of the most intriguing stories that comes from the Hermitage ruins is a young engineering student who is coming out to take a look at the building. He's just fascinated. He wants to take some pictures. It's the middle of a beautiful afternoon, and he walks up the hill, and as he crests the hill, he looks up and he sees this gorgeous, beautiful building, the building that it had to been. And then he looks and he sees whom we believe would be the ghost of Alma Dick Lauder, looks at him, smiles, and feels good that somebody else can see exactly the building that she continues to love to this day. So she is an example of somebody being completely tied to that and in so much in love with what had been there that she stayed there. And it almost seems as if she is so happy that somebody else can see it the way she sees it. And again, it's kind of creepy because the building disappears, then she disappears, and then he sees it for what it is, and then he gets out of there. But it's still it's still a very touching moment when you think about what he had just experienced.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly with you. And again, it leads you to believe that there must be multiple realities somehow. It makes me feel happy in a sense that she's happy. And that's not a bad way to spend eternity, I don't think, if you're happy. What really pines at me is when children seem to be trapped in death, especially with EVPs and things of that nature. Did you have any experiences like that? Was there any stories told to you of children at all?
Yeah, there's actually in the neighborhood that I live in on the West Mountain in Hamilton, Auchmar House. Auchmar House, again, being a building. Actually, my home is in what used to be the backyard of this glorious rolling estate. Again, associated with Sir Alan McNabb and all of the stately people who would come to visit the city. But there were no ghost stories until YTV had done a television series there about 10 years ago called Strange Days at Blake Halsey High. Think of it as it's kind of a Harry Potter, except instead of fantasy, it was science. And it was just interesting things that happened in a lab. So the staff and crew were often there late into the night. Some of them would just sleep there rather than going back home to Toronto and coming back to Hamilton. And it was there that they had witnessed some ghosts, one of which was the ghost of a little girl up on the second floor. But I think the creepiest story was related to somebody who had been up there, and her daughter was talking to somebody upstairs, and she said, "Who are you talking to?" She says, "I'm just talking with the little girl there." And of course you realize there is no little girl up there, and so you beat a hasty retreat out of there.
Oh, yeah. That's goosebump factor time,
Yeah.
without question. Yeah, there's something about kids that they don't seem to have those I won't say boundaries. It's not the word I'm looking at. Barriers is a better word. From this side to the other side, maybe I don't know. Maybe because it's. Go ahead.
I was going to say they haven't closed their minds yet. They haven't had their minds closed to what's out there. They probably they see, and they can conceptualize so much more than we have learned to close our minds. Kids, when you look at kids aren't born with prejudice. Kids are open, that everyone is equal, and they ask questions, and they may be embarrassing, as why is that man in a wheelchair or anything like that, but they're completely honest, and they're open, and they ask questions, and they embrace and they accept. I watch children in the playground just playing with one another, not recognizing differences, and you're a girl and you're a boy, and you're from this race and I'm from this race and you're this religion, and any of that. They don't care. They're just kids playing. And so that kind of acceptance would naturally lead you to believe that they accept and believe other things that we may have shut our minds to as we trained ourselves as we got older.
Sometimes it's a shame that we don't nurture that perception that they have, and we tend to try to define it and shut them down in many, many areas instead of congratulating them for having an open mind and entertaining those different ideas. I think it's, well said. Now, you and your wife had a bit of a creepy moment too.
Yeah.
You've got to tell this story, because when I read it, because we bought a home, and it's a new home, mind you, but there's always, is it on, we've all seen Poltergeist, was it on an Indian burial ground? Are their hands going to be coming out? You had something similar like that happen. Can you talk to us about that?
So when we first moved to Hamilton in '97, there was what Fran had called a haunted house, just not far from the neighborhood that we live in, that we used to go look at. And I mean, I always like going to places that are supposedly haunted. Everyone has a haunted house on some street in a neighborhood where they grew up, that either an old woman lived there by herself and she was a witch, or it was abandoned and everyone would see ghosts and all kinds of weird things happen in there. Yeah. So this was her haunted house from her childhood. Well, we looked at it and we went, oh my God, this is a gorgeous house. It was abandoned. It was in ruins. It was on a beautiful lot with beautiful view. Unfortunately, it had gotten torn down, but we had been fascinated with that lot, and we kept looking and waiting for a for sale sign to maybe we could buy the lot and put a house there, and we'd made inquiries, and nobody would get back to us about this lot. And it wasn't until I started doing research for the book that I realized that that was the Bellevue Mansion, which was also known as the Murder House or Murder Mansion. And the legend goes that there was a family living there. They were obviously well off, and in the middle of the night, for no reason, the father got up in the middle of the night, grabbed an axe, murdered his family, murdered his wife, murdered his children. Then he went up to the Widow's Walk, which overlooked the beautiful city below, and he hung himself from the rafters there. And so that story was creepy enough, but then it follows that not long after, another family moved into the house, and this time in the middle of the dark of the night, the son did the exact same thing, murdered the family. The story is potentially with the same axe that he found in the shed, and hung himself from the Widow's Walk. And when I heard those stories and then I relayed them to Francine, the look on her face, like the oh my God, because our son, and we thought we moved to the house, what would happen? Would he get, this is like a Jack Torrance sort of thing from The Shining, would he get taken over by the spirits and suddenly pick up an axe and start chasing us around the house?
Red rum.
Red rum, exactly. So that was the spooky part. Now, I mean, granted, I'm all creeped out. There's some amazing stories about this place, but I did try to do my due diligence. I tried to look at this with an open mind, saying, yes, I believe that ghosts exist. Here are the stories that I have heard. Here is the evidence of why this person may be the spirit who haunts here, because they died they died of influenza in a bed in this room, and that's why we think we see her ghost in the window sometimes. And in this particular case, I couldn't find any actual stories from official records that indicated there were murders and suicides in that neighborhood in a 50-year period. So I ended up, and it was funny. My editor and I got in a little bit of an argument over it because I actually explained in detail that I couldn't find anything to back these up. But man, they make a really good story. And he said, "Oh man, you're ruining the suspension of disbelief." Like, so I scaled back a little bit. I basically talk about the fact that, you know, while there was no evidence that could be found to support these stories, damn, they make good ghost stories, don't they? And part of it as well is, and this is something that Haunted Hamilton embraces beautifully when they do their tours, is they take history and they inject some truth from history, and they do a little bit of a manipulation to make it an interesting story, and it flows that much better. So there's always a kernel of truth with a little bit of elaboration. And again, you realize that. And that's the basis of good storytelling. That's why we have people create fictitious stories, because it sometimes comes out a lot better if you just give it a little bit of a fun spin. And so Bellevue Mansion, I'm still looking to purchase that property, even though I'm still a little bit leery.
Hello.
It is gorgeous. I still, when I go jogging through that neighborhood, I actually jog around the grounds of that, and I imagine what it must have been like with that house there. I imagine the stories. But in all honesty, it is such a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of land that I'm drawn to it still.
Oh,
not with an axe. I'm just drawn to it.
Maybe you want to examine exactly what you're being drawn to. Folks, we're talking about ghosts tonight. Haunted Hamilton, our guest tonight, Mark Leslie, www.nightfrightshow.com. The book is packed with these stories. There's, we just don't have time to go into all of them, obviously, folks, and in great detail, as Mark has taken the time to do exquisitely in this book. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. That's going to take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. Mark, another book we had talked about was called Campus Chills, where the book again is full of stories, but specifically from universities. And you can get the book, by the way, folks, www.nightfrightshow. As I say again, that whole show we did is in the archives when it was just a radio show, Night Fright. Now it's a television show, as you know. The reason why I bring that up is because I had just mentioned this story that my own personal experience at Concordia University. I went to McGill. All these buildings are of that same era. I'm a stone's throw from Queen's University, as I point over my left shoulder. They're all from, I guess, the mid-1850s. McMaster University is of the same era. It carries with it its own ghost stories as well, and those are related to in the book as well. Can we tell a few of those for the students that are watching right now and that are up late?
Of course. Don't go in the bookstore, it's haunted. No,
The murder of Mark.
I used to work at the bookstore at McMaster University, and actually got to know the good folks from Haunted Hamilton. We used to do ghost walks around Halloween. We would have a book event, bring in horror authors. That's where Campus Chills was born. We actually launched the book there, and we would do ghost walks of campus. And so to do that, we had to do some research into ghosts of McMaster. Ironically, the most famous ghosts having to do with the campus don't have to do with the campus itself, but with the family that started the campus. Now, McMaster University, which is in Hamilton, was initially in the city of Toronto. And so it's now known as the Keg Mansion, the Keg being the steakhouse. And that was the McMaster family residence. And that is haunted by 2 or 3 ghosts, depending on the stories that you believe. One of them is a little boy. Another one was a suicide, a maid who had hung herself, and occasionally you see her, the shadow of her body hanging in the rafters. So there's some interesting stories about the ghosts of the Keg Mansion. But, and this comes back to the courthouse in the downtown core of Hamilton. We call it the downtown campus location. It's a building that used to be the jail. And of course, there are stories of weird things being heard in the basement of the downtown buildings, where the speculation is that people may have died when they were locked in the cells there, and that they continue to they continue to play pranks and make strange noise and slam doors and things like that. So it's just one of those other creepy things about campus. And of course, there's Percy, who haunts Wallingford Hall and McMaster University, which is a residence. And the legend is that Percy had fallen in love with a young female who lived in that residence, and they got really, really close, and she got really, really attached to him. But then he wanted to pull away, and he wanted to see other people. But she would have none of that, so she killed him and stuffed his body into the dumbwaiter of that building. And apparently, as the legend goes, every time the new residents come into that, one of the seniors will tell them the story that Percy continues to haunt their residents. And we're not sure if it's the alcohol that the students are imbibing that is allowing them to see things, or the lack of sleep that they may be getting during Frosh Week. But there are continued stories from year to year of students seeing and hearing strange things in the residence, believing that it's Percy.
So McMaster's University is a pretty creepy place. What about the history professor?
This is actually relatively recent history, and it was a history professor who was working late on campus in her office, who had been accosted by a young man who was not right, and he had tied her up and killed her, and she was found the next morning. And then that was a really sad story, particularly because when I was working at McMaster and I was writing this book, I was talking to so many people who had been on campus for 40 years, and they knew her, and they were there that day. And so it was one of those moments where it was a really scary and creepy story, but it was so close to home, and that made it really, really
so because you talk about this, and that's the point I want to make. You showed a lot of respect towards this story in not revealing the person's name, etc. And there was a few other stories that would fall under that umbrella as well. How did you discern which stories to keep in and which ones to leave out? I think that's important because a lot of students can be a little bit serious now, folks. A lot of students that are watching right now are budding writers, as you well know. How would you make those calls on what to include and what not to include?
I think there's a possibility of protecting the innocent. So in cases where it was so recent, you don't want to reveal people's names. Again, one of the stories was a colleague of mine, and he did not want his name to be revealed. So again, I made up a fictitious name for him, and the story is still a fascinating and interesting story. The neighborhood is identified, not the specific house. And it still works because at the basis of the story is the hero, what the hero encounters, the situation, and how the hero goes through the story. So that's all still held together without having to reveal the names. And it's the same thing with the professor. You don't lose that dread or that fear that you have that this happened here on this campus to an innocent professor who was just putting in overtime and working in her office, and it could happen to anyone. And that's the fear, and that's the reality that you're looking at. You don't really need to reveal her name and maybe dredge up bad memories for the family who are still there, or her friends, or whatever. So you're not dragging her name through it at all. She was just an innocent victim. So it's really, really tough. It's really, really tough. In a lot of times, you trust your gut. You tend to have a pretty decent idea of what's right and what's wrong. And I just followed my instinct when it came to that.
I always say it's the message that's important, not the messenger. So I think you handled it very, very well.
Thanks.
Kudos. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it takes to be a writer. Do you have a discipline that you write every day? And why are you, I've got all these 3 books here, and they're all horror books. You ever thought about writing a sports book? No, I'm kidding. But why horror as a medium? What is it that's enticing you about that medium?
You know, it's really funny. My mom says, "Why can't you write a nice romance?" Uh, I uh, I
Because
tend to write.
Twilight's already been written, and Kelly
Yeah,
Armstrong's writes good books too. Anyways,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
I tend to write stories, and I love to tell stories. I've always loved to tell stories. I tend to always want to speculate, what if? What if ghosts were real? What if Bigfoot existed? What if an axe murderer came breaking into our house? What would we do? That sort of thing. For some strange reason, there was always some dark element to it. I like to joke with my mom that the reason I write horror is because of this one time in my childhood, growing up in Levack, Ontario, which is a 45-minute drive north of Sudbury.
I was going to close with this story. You just screwed me up, but go ahead.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, man.
I was coming into my garage to put my bike away, very good, make sure it's put away properly, the whole bit, and then seeing a dark shadow swinging in the back of the garage, and this horrid smell that I can't describe as anything more than the smell of death, just invading the whole garage. And as my eyes slowly adjust to the light, hearing the drip, 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 and seeing two dead moose hanging in the garage that are being bled to death, because you have to do that. My dad was a moose hunter, and before he brought the moose to the butcher, you had to hang them, you had to bleed them dry. And so I always tell my mom, I said, it's the dead beasts hanging in the garage with the dripping blood and everything, and you wonder why I write horror stories.
You scarred me. That wasn't the story I was thinking of, and now we do really have to wrap up. I was thinking of the other Levack story, Sudbury. It's just Sudbury's here, folks. It's just a little bit north, 70 kilometers north. Yeah, not even. Yeah,
45?
45. I'm way off. Okay, 45 kilometers north of Sudbury. There's a school there, Levack Public School. Can we talk about that story?
Oh, we're talking about the ghost, and the ghost that used to play the piano in the basement.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
the one. Yeah, can we talk about
That was
that
just
one?
the one, yeah, because I talk about Dundas, the Dundas District Elementary School, and Russell, who was the practical joker custodian who decided that he would come back to visit his friends after death, and sure enough, they believe that the practical joker ghost continues to haunt the building was Russell. And that reminded me of a story from my own childhood when we were hanging out at recess and daring each other to run down through the basement and out the other side. And nobody ever dared make the trip because we get halfway down, someone would probably be a custodian that would bump the piano and it would make a noise and scare the crap out of the kids, and they'd come flying back up the stairs. And again, I mean, I never made the trip. Even now, when I think about that, well, actually, that school is gone now. But I remember going there later as an adult and still being a little bit just nervous about walking in the basement.
Uneasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad's office was down on that floor, and it was like, I'll wait till you come. I'm not going to visit you there. I'll just wait till you come back. Come back upstairs, Dad.
Mark Leslie's been our guest tonight, folks. The book, of course, three books. Campus Jules, you're going to find the show for that in the archives, www.nightfrightshow.com. It's a great book, folks. It's all stories, some of them true, some of them are fictitious, about living life on the campus and all the horror stories that surround that. If you're a student and you want to stay up late at night, oh yeah, baby, that's the one. And this one too, Haunted Hamilton, his latest effort, Mark Leslie, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest book cover, take you right to a spot. All the stories we've been talking about tonight are in this book, but in far more detail. He takes the time, and what's great about this book too is you're going to learn a lot about Hamilton, and you're going to identify with certain aspects that all cities have. All cities have these legends, and of course, if you're in Toronto, make the trek down to Hamilton. 45 minutes would be well worth your while. Take the haunted ghost tour of Hamilton as well too. What's next for you, Mark?
I am working on a horror novel called I, Death that is imminent, is back and forth between me and my editor, and I'm already working on my next collection of true ghost stories. There's actually two in the works right now. One that looks like it's going to be based on Sudbury, Ontario, my old stomping grounds, and another themed book. Ironically, having written a book like this, people are now approaching me with their ghost stories, and I already have more than enough to write another book about ghosts.
Congratulations, that's wonderful. Well deserved, because you've been at this for a while, and you're a great writer. You're a great guy too. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Please keep us in mind for your next book as well, and keep us posted, will you?
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Folks, you've been watching Night Fright with our guest tonight, Mark Leslie. The book is called, once again, Haunted Hamilton, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. That's going to take you to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. Thanks for joining us tonight. See you next time.
Listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy